What's going on, guys? The NBA is finally back. The preseason starts today when this video drops. And then the regular season is going to get right underway about a week or so after that. So I think it's a good time to talk about who I think should be in consideration for most improved player. And as you could tell by the thumbnail, I think Michael Porter Jr. should be one of those guys. So last season, Michael Porter Jr. had his second season in which he was able to play a little more than he did in the past, but still didn't get too much playing time in the regular season. He only played, 5 to 10 minutes a game. He got up a few shots from time to time, but for the most part, it didn't seem like he was a crucial part of their offense, and it seemed like the Nuggets were more in win-now mode instead of letting their younger guys like him and Bobo develop into the possible stars that they might be able to be, which completely makes sense. But then the playoffs rolled around and MPJ started to get a few more minutes. He got more shots. His points per game started to go up a little bit. His efficiency did drop a tad, but that's because he was finally getting regular playing time minutes. As you can see on the screen right now, I put his stats up from the playoffs, and I think it's a good indication of where his floor should be for the majority of the rest of his career. Scoring, 11, 12 points per game is good, but I think MPJ is a guy that can be that 15 to 20, even 25 plus point per game scorer once he develops and gets more shots. So this upcoming season for the Nuggets and MPJ is going to be interesting because the team looks a little different than what they did last season, mainly due to the loss of Jerami Grant and even Mason Plumlee. So those are 2 4/5s that, had a decent role in this team. Jerami Grant obviously having a little bigger of a role, being that solid bench piece that can defend bigger guards and most forwards and centers. And on top of that, losing Mason Plumlee isn't the biggest deal, but it does hurt them a little bit. He gave some extra depth at the center position and did some, little defensive rebounding things that Jokic might not be the best at. So now they're missing out on that a little bit. And all this basically means is that guys like Michael Porter Jr. and Paul Millsap are going to have to step up even more. And obviously, Paul Millsap is getting up there in age. I think he's 35, 36 years old at this point. So his solid years in the NBA are going to be coming to an end very soon. And Michael Porter Jr. is entering his third season in the NBA. Well, technically his second season, but we'll get to that later. So I think it's about time for MPJ to get his shots up and really step up for this team. It's going to be really hard for him to take over the Jerami Grant role, so I don't think that's what the Nuggets want him to do. I think they want him to be that third scoring option behind Murray and Jokic, where Michael Porter Jr. can take his guy off the dribble if he needs to. He could spot up in the corner from time to time. He could play in the pick and roll. He could be down in the post getting a pass from Jokic. There's so many different ways that MPJ can play on the offensive end, which is why I think he's so valuable to this team moving forward. Now, obviously, he's not going to be able to cover all the holes that are left behind with Jerami Grant leaving. Specifically, I'm talking about the defensive end because, as we all know, Michael Porter Jr. isn't really known for his defense. In the bubble, we saw that MPJ isn't really the best on defense. He often finds himself a little lost on the defensive end, maybe because he doesn't know how to exactly play defense in the NBA, considering that his playing time in the regular season was kind of hit or miss. So maybe with him getting more minutes during the regular season, it'll help him prepare for the next playoff run, but we can't be sure about that. I mean, in the bubble, there was tons of times where he was letting guys get by him so easily, and he didn't really know where he was supposed to be. But I do think there was some good things where he was coming over from the weak side and getting a good contest on a guy that might have gotten by Murray, or even coming over and getting a block from the weak side. So I think if he can continue to do something like that, then he should see some success on defense. Obviously, I don't expect him to be like a super positive on that end, but if he could just not be, negative to the point where he's dragging down the whole team. And that's important because this isn't really the best defensive team with them losing Grant and even Plumlee. the two stars on the team, Murray and Jokic, are both known as bad defenders. I mean, Jokic wasn't terrible in the bubble in the playoffs. There was times where he was holding his own, and he is strong enough to hold off some of the bigger centers in the post, but he's obviously not very athletic. And the same could be said about Murray. Yeah, he's athletic, but defensively, he doesn't have the energy because he's wasting it all on the offensive end. And I don't mean to say wasting in that Murray isn't a great offensive player, because he is. We all saw what he could do, where he's dropping 40, 50 plus points in the playoffs. But when he does that and he has to carry his team, there's nothing he could do on defense. So I think it's going to be really important for not only Michael Porter Jr. to play great on the offensive end, but he needs to find himself on defense a little bit. And I'm not sure that we'll see that this upcoming season, but maybe in 2 or 3 seasons, we'll see a Michael Porter Jr. that won't be a negative on defense, and the Nuggets won't have to worry about hiding him on that end, because they also have other guys that aren't so good defensively. I expect the Nuggets to be a top 4 seed in the West again, and for them to make, a run at least into the second round. And a big part of that is going to be because of Michael Porter Jr. This team isn't as deep as it once was. Besides the guys that they lost, some of the other guys, might have dropped off a little bit. Gary Harris in the past couple seasons hasn't been nearly as what he can be offensively, and it's a little tough to watch when he's putting up bricks every time he shoots, but what he brings on the defensive end makes up for it, so that's okay. And then, like I mentioned earlier, Paul Millsap is getting up there in age. He's not going to be able to do this for much longer, so MPJ needs to step up and take over that role. And I think he'll be able to do that this upcoming season for the most part. I could see Jokic averaging, 22 to 24 points maybe, Murray around 18 to 20, maybe a little more than that, and I could see Michael Porter Jr. between 16 and 20. And if he does do that, I think he should be in real contention for Most Improved Player. But the problem is, this is technically his sophomore season. So when he was drafted 2 years ago, he didn't play in his rookie season because of his back injury and the surgery that he had done. So the Nuggets decided it was best to rest him for the entire season, which made sense. I mean, they were in contention, and he was a young rookie with a bunch of promise, so they didn't want to rush him into playing. So last season was his technical rookie season, and this year would be his sophomore season. And as most NBA fans know, there really hasn't been many sophomores that ever win Most Improved Player. I think there's only been 2 in the history of the NBA, so his chances of winning Most Improved Player are pretty slim. Even if he does seem like the most improved player, that's not always how the award works. I mean, we saw, Devontae Graham upped his averages by like 15 points or something crazy like that, and he wasn't even really in real consideration for the award. So, I mean, he's going up against some guys like Shea, Lonzo, Jamal Murray, and none of those guys are sophomores, so I don't think he'll win the award, but I do think he'll be the most improved player, if that makes sense. So I don't really have much else to say about MPJ. I hope the best for him, and I hope the Nuggets do really well again next season. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, leave your comments down below so we could talk more about the NBA, and subscribe if you're new. I post weekly videos about the NBA, so if you like that stuff, make sure to ring the bell so you never miss out on another one of my videos.